Hey YouTube, welcome back. I've got another build here for you. This is another result of the Vision GL weekend tournament here in Last Epoch World. So we're playing some Marksman. The three skills for the weekend were Detonating Arrow, Puncture, and Cinder Strike. So we have to pick one of these skills, incorporate it into our build, spec into it, use it on our bar as well, and then push as far into the arena as we can. So we are currently rank 1. It sounds like we're going to be rank 1 for the weekend as well. And we're number 4 on the ladder at 321 waves. So we ended up playing a Cinder Strike build, and it is, oh my god, it's so much fun to play. I don't know if this is like better in a arena environment than Bow Mage is, just like using Mourningfrost, scaling your crit damage, and using the Reign of Winter unique bow that comes from Hayrot. That's a very good build because it has a lot of range to it. So I wanted to play Cinder Strike this weekend because it's so much fun, and I haven't played it in a while, and I specifically haven't played Cinder Strike with Kelthon Blasting Agent along with the new bow from maybe a patch ago or so, Dragonsong. So that was my goal for the weekend. I wanted to get a whole bunch of unique items. I had some plans to pivot around and maybe play a different build in case my things didn't come together. So one of the things I want to highlight real quick about this build is kind of the leveling process of it. So when you go into one of these weekend tournaments, if you want a bunch of unique items, sometimes you don't get them. So what I was planning for was to play this like crit throwing build that happens to be using Cinder Strike, but just scaling throwing damage. But to level up, I used Puncture, and Puncture is like a bleed bow skill. It's extremely easy to level with. For a single target, you can use Flurry. You can even use Umbral Blades for single target damage. Just tossing out an Umbral Blade, allowing it to spin on the ground, and apply some extra bleeds from your global buff that Puncture provides to you. And both Flurry and Umbral Blades are great to augment your Puncture leveling. So beyond that, I transitioned into a Bleed Detonating Arrow. It's a build that I played before. I don't see other people play it, which kind of surprised me. I think Bleed Detonating Arrow is really good. It gets to use unconverted Detonating Arrow, which means that you also get to use the Lightning Tendrils, which means on single target, when you right click, you get 3 applications of a bow hit, and all of those apply your bleed stacks. So it's Bleed Detonating Arrow. I've got a build guide on that on YouTube as well if you're interested, but I think it's a pretty good way of leveling along with Puncture. Ultimately, once we were doing our normal monoliths, we dropped a Reign of Winter, which is sweet. I actually transitioned at that point from doing Bleed Detonating Arrow into Bleed Detonating Arrow with Hayrot's bow, with Reign of Winter. When you have 3 bow hits that all have a chance of applying, of shooting out an icicle, the icicle also inherits all of your global puncture chance. So it doesn't count as bleed with a bow hit, but it does count as any generic bleed chance. So when you're playing these tournaments, just make sure you have a backup plan in case things don't turn out the way you want. So for this build, we are level 99 and a quarter or so. We did a lot of gaming this weekend, but it was really fun, and this build is wicked fast as well, the way that it gets to clear with Umbral Blades trailing behind you. So we have 2,800 life. We could have 3,000 life if things turned out better. We could probably hit maybe 32 or 3,300 the way that I was building this character if I had hybrid life in the places that I wanted. Because I didn't have hybrid life on my belt, and I didn't have hybrid life on my gloves. But the rest of the build was like super fun to play. So let me walk you through this build, and then at the end of this video, I've got like 2 or 3 things that I want to highlight about decisions that you might make while you're playing a build like this. So first things first, let's talk about the skills. We are a Cinder Strike build. Cinder Strike has everything in the world except for damage. It really doesn't deal much damage at all, but it gives you global buffs, it gives you hits, and hits give you, armor shred and fire shred, things like that. So we have fire shred here, which means we're not going to grab it in our blessing, because we're going to grab armor because we're playing in hardcore, instead of the fire res shred on the blessings. We have this here. We have like some extra little daggers that shoot out, and then we have 5 daggers. It just means that we have these little things trailing around us, and they shoot out and apply extra fire shred and armor shred. Next up, we have all these nodes in the bottom, and in fact, I'm going to move my head. We have 5 points here in oil coating, which gives us 25% fire damage per stack, and we oftentimes have about 10 stacks. So this is 250% increased damage. Not more, just increase. The other important node is 5 points over here, and again, we have about 10 stacks oftentimes, so we're getting about 50 fire throwing damage while we're running around. And this fire throwing damage is global, along with the oil coating, so that means it's going to apply to Cinder Strike's Burning Daggers, it's going to apply to Shurikens, it's going to apply to Decoy's Explosion, and it's going to apply to Umbral Blades. So there's a lot of increased and flat damage for our other skills. Shift will be the next skill that we talk about. It kind of ties the whole room together. So we have Shurikens procced, spinning around our character like a little bladed armor. This is very common. You see this on rogue builds all the time. On the bottom, we have our invulnerability and 4 out of 5 points into elusive, meaning that when we dash, we go from 590 dodge to 9,000 dodge. So we have the invulnerability while dashing, and we're basically invulnerable after we are done dashing as well. On the very bottom right side, this is kind of a bug, but it doesn't feel like a bug. It feels like this is the way that the game is supposed to be. So I'll explain why this is important, but we have one shadow behind us whenever we dash, and then when we shift, we also use Shadow Cascade. This says if you're using a melee weapon, you attack with Shadow Cascade. We're using a bow, but it works anyways. This bug has been in the game for a long time, and to me, it's just part of the game, and I think that this is how the game should work, because I think it's really fun. But we'll see whether this actually gets patched at some point in the future. Fun note, these nodes up on the top, this Unseen Strike that says if using a melee weapon, it doesn't actually require a melee weapon. So if you want to use these using a bow, currently, patch 085F, you can, and these have been working like this for a long time. So what this means whenever we dash, we have that little spin going behind us, but talking about our third skill here, Umbral Blades, we've got this node here, Umbral Remnant. Whenever one of your shadows expire, they also leave an Umbral Blade. So in Shift, we need to make sure that we leave a shadow behind us, and we also need to make sure that the shadow expires. So that's why we have this node down here, even though it's really not dealing much damage at all. So we dash, we leave an Umbral Blade behind us, and that's feeling pretty good. The rest of Umbral Blades is some pretty normal looking nodes in the top left, turning it into one big blade, giving its area and duration, and then having it slightly seek out its enemies. We're grabbing this point here because it's a 5% more damage node, and we really don't have much to take beyond that. Earlier on, I was taking these nodes up here just to get some extra chill in my build because I didn't have any chill at all. The reason that I'm not taking these nodes, and I instead took these relatively useless nodes here instead, the reason that I'm not using these nodes is that my arrow guard has chill on it. Because I had chill, I didn't have a reason for these nodes here anymore. So the rest of this is just filling out some fluff nodes. This, relatively useless. This is some flat damage, so we might as well take it. Going to our third skill, we said that Shift had some nice synergy for us because on the very bottom right, it creates a shadow and then consumes the shadow. We also have shadows creating our Umbral Blades over here. For our fourth skill, let's talk about Decoy. Decoy is a tremendous amount of damage because we're using Kelthyn Blasting Agent here. And this turns it from a decoy into basically a hand grenade. And we're throwing out 3 of them. And then when those hand grenades explode, when the decoy explodes, they're going to leave 3 shadows. And then when the shadows expire, we have Umbral Blades. So we have a lot of moving pieces to the build, but they all come together and it all scales throwing damage and it feels excellent. So that's why we have this Shrouded Core node here. It is important to us. The rest of these nodes are just damage because we have damage here, area and damage here, damage here, damage here, and triple your damage here for some reason. I don't know why Decoy deals so much damage. I don't know why Decoy has 300% effectiveness of added damage. So anytime that we add throwing damage to our build by using oil coating, for example, or by adding throwing damage from our gear, it's times 6 because it's 600% effectiveness added damage. The last skill here that I want to talk about is Shurikens. So Shurikens, you've seen these nodes on the very bottom right very often. So this is just bladed armor, some extra, bladed armor, some extra percent armor, which is why we're trying to get flat armor in the build as well from our blessings. We'll talk about that later. Then some extra duration here. I only have 1 point in duration because frankly, I'm using Shift as often as I possibly can, which means I'm always going to have this up anyways. We've got some nodes here for Pierce, and then we have some weird looking stuff up here. And I guess I want to call this out for you. So Shurikens has this node entry points. And recently, maybe a month ago or so, I discovered, or I was told by a developer, that this node here, it's kind of like Shatter Shock from Lightning Blast, if you know what I mean. This says 90% more hit damage, but what it means is 90% more hit damage for bleeds, 90% more hit damage for ignite or for poisons on the enemy. So there's actually 2 separate, distinct 90% more damage multipliers on this node, which means that this is one of the most busted nodes in the game. This is a tremendous amount of damage. Remember, if it's multiplicative, it's not 90 plus 90. It's 1.9 times 1.9. So this is a huge amount of damage, assuming that we can get some kind of bleed or we can get some kind of poison. So the poison requirement from this, and the reason that I didn't path her on the bottom, is that Laraka's has a lot of chance to poison on throwing hit here, and then we have lots of throwing hits. So we can meet the poison requirement pretty well, but we have very, very low bleed chance in the build. Technically, if I had a 4 LP Dragonsong, I might be interested in like attack speed and crit multi as the prefixes, maybe slower stun as a suffix, and then maybe bleed as a suffix as well. Because some global bleed chance might help to juice up this node a whole bunch. But the fact that this is 2 separate 90% more multipliers, I didn't know that for a long time. So there, now you know too. Next up, let's talk about the mastery real quick. In our base tree with 33 points, we have 18 points in Blade Dancer. The first 8 I would say are mandatory. The rest of these are kind of fluff. You can be more aggressive and grab more damage if you want to, but I've been playing in hardcore, so I'm a coward and I want to live. So we have 33 here, 18 in Blade Dancer, and the 61 into our Marksman skill tree. So the base tree first, we have attack speed and physical damage. Just the attack speed is the most important part. The physical damage is fine, but feels good for leveling. I'm happy with this. We have 155. I do this in every single rogue build that I play. I find these nodes very, very useful. Less damage taken while moving, percent dodge rating, which you don't get much of outside of this node, unless you're building on your gear. And then these nodes for haste on hit and percent damage per movement speed. You got about 100% movement speed very, very often. So that means that this node is about 20% more damage per point. This node's very good. I recommend you taking it. We have 5 points here into Glancing Blows, and the rest of this is fluff. I picked up these 8 points into Dexterity at level 90 or so. So I did not prioritize these much because I'm not using Mourningfrost boots. We'll talk about that later. Blade Dancer, we touched on this already. Let's talk about Marksman. In Marksman, we have 881 for our first couple points. The health gain on bow attack is excellent, helps us for sustain. Then some extra dexterity and dodge rating debuff, so that's fine. In my Marksman characters, and sometimes in my Blade Dancers as well, I grab 1 point into concentration and 8 points into meditation, because I find that this 8 points, just the fact that it gives you that 200 dodge rating, I value that very highly. So that's my choice here. If you're comfortable not getting hit, these nodes are pretty good. 15% increased damage per point. And then you can spec into Reflection as well, if you're comfortable not getting hit. I'm basically playing Cinder Strike as a melee build, so I'm not going to waste those other points. Next up is the reason that we don't need Critical Strike chance in our build. Cinder Strike is cool because it has the bow attack, it has the burning daggers, and then for our build, we have the Shurikens spinning around us, we have the Decoys hitting 3 times, we have Umbral Blades hitting very, very often, which means that if we have a 100% chance to critical vulnerability on hit, we're going to apply a whole bunch of crit vulnerability. And very soon, we're going to have a 100% crit chance with very, very low effort. So this is all of my crit chance, and it feels fantastic. We have 1 point here. This is bow critical strike multiplier, and most of my damage is throwing damage, so I don't prioritize this for damage, but I would put as many points into heightened senses as I need in order to get crit avoidance. Next up is the soft core point. If you want to juice up your damage, this is one of the places to do this. So as you attack, you'll see the little green means go button here. So pop, to green means go. We have 3 seconds of huge attack speed and then 7 seconds of very low attack speed at that point. And then 1 point into covering fire. We're only taking this for Silver Shroud. If you put more points in this, you only get more ward. I don't care about ward. I only want that 1 Silver Shroud for the 1 guaranteed dodge. Next up, we have all of our mana sustain, 1 point in Ethereal Arrows, and 5 in Mana Warp. This makes it so that we can use Decoy on cooldown and not care about the huge mana cost on it. On the bottom here, we do have some bow damage, but we're ignoring this. We're really just taking Sharpshooter so that we can get the points over here, this Death from Afar. And this gives us Stun Chance, which feels really good. We'll talk about this later as well. And Armor Shred Chance per stack. So this stacks up to 10 times. This is 200% shred per stack of Sharpshooter, or I guess 200% chance total, along with all of those hits that we have going on. Then I would say almost the most important part is this Barrage of Pain. So we have 1 point here because we don't care about the crit chance itself, but we do care about these perfect aim nodes here. So I've got some crit multi on my gear, but for the most part, a lot of my crit multi is coming from this point here. This is 75 crit multi. 75 crit multi and 75 health gain on crit. even if you don't have Leech in your build, I have Leech in my build because I just happen to get it, but even if you don't have Leech in your build, this is tremendously strong with all of your small hits that you're proccing in your build to give you sustain. So that's the mastery there. Let's go ahead and talk about the gear. The gear is very easy to talk about. Like, my gear is fine, but what you need to know before I even hover over anything, you need to know dexterity, vitality, throwing fire damage, it's called the cursed affix, crit multi. Those are the 4 things that you care about. Those are the most important. So I'll hover over my gear here. We want as much life as possible. I'm just gonna hover. I don't think the gear is that interesting. As long as you know, like, you want all of your resistances, you want your crit avoid, you want as much endurance as you can fit in the build, but you know, at the end of the day, you're just gonna take whatever you can get in terms of your gearing during these weekend races. So again, for our helmet with like vitality and cooldown recovery speed, cooldown's pretty important because we want decoy to be as low as possible and also shift to be as low as possible. Because shift, remember, is kind of tying the room together by proccing a whole bunch of stuff for us. On our rings, dexterity and throwing fire damage. Hopefully dexterity, throwing fire damage like this. Laracas is important for us because it gives us up to 130 throwing crit multi. So these are busted gloves. They also happen to be common, along with Dragonsong that happens to be common. Arrow Guard is common, and Calthan Blasting Agent is common, which means that if you want to play this build for more than 3 or 4 days, it is fairly likely that you'll be able to find these pieces of gear with 1 or maybe even 2 or 3 LP on them. And then you can get things like maybe Frailty or Hybrid Life on your Laracas. That's what I would prioritize for me. For your Dragonsong, you could prioritize getting things like attack speed or crit multi. Those would be insane. For your Arrow Guard, getting attack speed, dexterity, chill, shock, some kind of resistance to make your gearing process better. Those would all be excellent. And then for Calthan Blasting Agent, I would look for plus levels to Cinder Strike, crit multi, frailty, and maybe endurance. Endurance, health, some kind of resistance, one of those suffixes to make the rest of your gearing process easy. So beyond that, fire damage, health, cleanse, because we always have cleanse on the belt. And then for our boots, we have as much life as we can get and a little bit of resistance to round things out. For our idols, we have one important idol up here, Throne of Ambition. This allows us to be really tanky and get some extra damage against bosses. So this feels great. I always like using this in hardcore. We have access to these 1x3s. I actually love these things. Percent health and percent increased damage while wielding a bow. So this does apply to like throwing hits, which is the majority of our damage. So both of these things feel great. We've got a little bit of resistance in life, a little bit of resistance, and resistance vitality. I snuck in this, and if it hadn't rolled so well, I don't think I would have used it. I think I would have used one of the 2x2s that has the tense affix on it instead, because that's a great way of juicing up some extra damage. If I hadn't had this exact 4x1, I think I would have used something like this. One of these, 20% increased bow attack speed with a 10-second cooldown. These things are very, very strong, because all we care about, for the most part, is attack speed and crit multi. The fact that mine rolled so well here, we have a 60 life, that's 6 vitality there, and 89 armor shred effect. Remember, we have a lot of armor shred already. We have 200% chance to armor shred on hit, and then we're almost doubling the effect of all of the armor shred. This feels really, really good. It's a great way of juicing up the damage. I wouldn't use 2 of these idols, but I think one of them, especially if it's rolled this well, I suspect that it's very worthwhile. All right, the last thing we want to talk about here is the blessings, and then I'll talk about a couple interesting talking points about the book. For our blessings here, we have throwing damage leeched as health. I was anticipating getting crit multi, and that'd be a better way to go for like softcore if you want as much damage as possible, but I have a lot of damage or like life gain on hit, but I don't have any leech at all in my character. So this was pretty good. I think this is better than like flat life. I'd rather the throwing damage leech as health. I did this this monolith a couple times and I never got crit multi, so that's why I'm using this. I'm happy with it, but I think crit multi is a better choice overall. For ending the storm here, I actually have 93% chance to shock on hit. What I could have done, and this is important, I could have gone lightning res here and then moved my lightning res off and picked up a cold res blessing or a cold res idol here. I would drop my cold res from Hayrot, and then I would use the Hayrot blessing for percent armor. So here's why I didn't do that. And I actually did this intentionally. I wanted shock here, which meant that I had to give up the percent armor here. You have a lot of percent armor in your build already because of the Shurikens and these nodes here on the very bottom right, and you don't have much flat armor. So I figured that getting the flat armor from Spirits of Fire, this 276 goes up to 320. I figured that getting the flat armor here and then maybe getting some armor on my gear would be a nice buffer for my health total with that armor. And I didn't think this was going to be worthwhile. So I wanted either Fizz or Cold. Here we got Cold. So the reason we got Shock is when I was testing out this build, my character did have Shock on its gear. So I tested out this build right before the weekend started, and it felt really good, and I was stunning monsters all the time. And I was kind of surprised that I was stunning monsters all the time. It's like, why am I stunning so much? You have stun from your mastery already, from these nodes in the very bottom right. You have a 200% chance to stun on hit. Remember, it's 10 stacks and 10 times 20, right? But if you want stun, stun also works really well with shock, because shock is a percent, I guess it's a chance for the enemy to receive a stun. So it's like increased damage taken, right? So I think if you're realistically trying to stun monsters, having both shock and stun is an important place to have. So there were moments between 200 and 300 waves in the arena that just really stood out to me. Where like I'm stunning a Diamond Matron over and over, I'm stunning a Profane Flesh over and over, maybe a Gold Elemental before it does this big wind-up punch. I think the shock is very good to have somewhere in your build, and having up to 93 here, I'm actually happy with this. I didn't want this to be lightning resistant, so I think it's pretty good. The rest of our blessings, we got some crit avoidance. This is fine, and then we have, like I said, the cold resistance here. We have some flat armor, and then nothing else matters because they're all pertaining to drop rates. And who cares? There's three more things that I want to mention about this build as we wrap up. Thing number one is, once again, I like calling this out whenever I have a build that excels with it, but if you love one-shotting Diamond Matrons, this is a build for you. Some of these builds, just like, they jump on a Diamond Matron and the Diamond Matron dies immediately, even at 300 waves in the arena. I'll see if I can put in a good clip for the YouTube video, but it really feels good having that much damage just to pop a Diamond Matron if you need to. The second thing that I want to talk about is Hell Reach versus Dragonsong. So I've got a couple of Hell Reaches here, and I was thinking about using one of these if I had the Kelthyn Blasting Agent and if I didn't have the Dragonsong yet. So I actually have a 1 LP, a 2 LP, a 3 LP, and another 3 LP Hell Reach. However, just the fact that Dragonsong has +2 to fire skills, that part alone, I think makes it worthwhile. So the +2 gives you Cinder Strike for some extra defense, and the +2 gives you extra more damage multipliers on Decoy. I think those are really, really strong. And then not only that, but honestly, casting Dragonfire on crit with all those throwing attacks and the Shurikens, the Umbral Blades, all happening at the same time, the Dragonfire feels really good. It casts directly in front of you, so it doesn't auto-target. I kind of wish it did, but oh well. But the way that you're playing this build for the most part is, you're running away from a monster, you're kiting toward it, then maybe you do this, and then you're kiting back toward it again, so you have some more Dragonfire shooting out in front of you. It's another hit. It helps to proc all the debuffs your character has access to. It feels really good. If you can get attack speed or crit multi on this thing, Dragonsong is insane for this build. If you're only trying to scale the Dragonfire itself, I think your build is going to feel bad. I don't think you're going to enjoy that. However, using Dragonsong in this Cinder Strike build, along with Decoy and Kelthyn Blasting Agent, S tier. This thing feels fantastic, so I'm happy with that a lot. The last thing is, alright, why are we not using Mourningfrost boots to get more damage? So we have 59 dexterity here, and certainly if you're going to play this build for more than 3 or 4 days, Mourningfrost is an incredible way to scale damage. We have a lot of flat damage already. We have about 50 from our oil coating that we have up. But, adding another 59 on top of that to all of our throwing attacks would be a nice way of scaling damage. Do we need that damage? I don't think so. We have a tremendous amount of damage. And we can, one-shot Diamond Matrons at 300 waves in the arena. And we can do it relatively safely too if we're timing things well. So I don't think you need the damage. I think you're better off just like using as much life as you can, getting some extra fire res, getting that lightning res, or whatever your suffixes are going to be here. I would advocate this. I don't think you need damage here. If you want damage, get an LP Dragonsong, get an LP Arrow Guard with crit multi on it. I don't think you can get crit multi. You can get bow attacks on your prefixes, or even get crit multi or plus levels to plus levels to Cinder Strike on your Kelthon Blasting Agent. I think those are the places that you'd like to get extra offense if you can. If you want more defense for the build, just swapping out the Bone Amulet here and instead using an Aurora's Time Glass would be fantastic. It feels good that we have 4 items here that are all labeled common. They're all pretty easy to target farm or even use a Rune of Ascendance for. So I'm glad that these all came together and allowed me to play a build that is so much fun. If you like the build, if you have questions about it, you can always leave those in the comment section of this YouTube video here, or you can drop by Twitch at twitch.tv/PeriodPig, where I stream almost every day, playing some kind of last epoch stuff, maybe some variety things too. But that is about it for the build. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it, and I'll see you next time.